All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the MoneyShift podcast. We're about to get started. I'm about to hit that record button and we're going to get going. Nina, we got a lot of stuff on the docket today. There's some top speed car news. There's some cheap car news, some electric car news. There's a bunch of stuff going on and anything you guys want to talk about. So at any point, if there is a topic or something that I'm not covering that you want to talk about, post it in the chat. Let's talk about it. I love having discussions with everybody in the chat at any point, whether you want to talk about used cars, new cars, something we're talking about the show, something we're not talking about on the show, whatever, doesn't matter. Want to talk news, want to talk automotive. Good news, everyone, is right, Nate. We are back. So I'm going to hit that record button on Audacity and we're going to get this podcast going, shall we? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the MoneyShift podcast. I am Thanasi, and today we got some car news. And we got car news in all different spots, okay? We got fast car news. We got some crazy debates. We got just a bunch of things going on. And as always, we are streaming live. So if you guys are listening to this on the podcast on the 4th or after of November, know this. You can get this content one day early if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, if you follow us on Facebook at MoneyShift Podcast or MoneyShift on YouTube, you can watch our pretty faces talk about car news, and you can follow along. We're going to be showing pictures throughout this whole time. So any of the cars that we're talking about, you'll be able to see them live and be able to really see what I see and hear what we're talking about. I think that just adds a little bit of color to the podcast that you don't get just by listening to our just beautiful voices over your radio. And as always, we do love conversations. So Nina kicks it off in the chat. She says, what do you think about the 2020 GTI Golf Autobahn before we start? What do I think about that car? I think it is the best daily driver you can own, sub $30,000, or even above that $30,000 mark, which is what they stickered at. They're screwed together incredibly well. They're really, really fast for that price range. They're incredibly comfortable, and they're good-looking cars. That MK 7.5 GTI is one of the better-looking sub-$40,000 cars you can get in the segment. So congratulations on that purchase. It is a bitchin' car indeed. Really nice car. Congratulations on that. Nate says D3 S8 or 5-liter Equus. Great question, Nate. I would say D3 S8 because you have the mechanical chops to give that V10 the attention it needs to survive. So live your dreams and get that V10. Speaking of cars that could be potentially unreliable, you guys remember the Phaeton. I talked about that car last week. Well, here's a little update on it, okay? 2 issues with the Phaeton. And I know you guys are thinking, like, Thanasi, you bought this car recently. We all advised you against it. We told you, don't buy this car. It's going to be the end to your wallet. And I already have issues with it, but the issues that I have with it are not crazy, okay? I have the HID flicker issue, which is very popular in these cars. It's where you're driving down the road and the HIDs sort of blink because they're just about to go out, so it just needs new HID bulbs. Got those, $70, whatever, is what it is. Second issue, tires. They're just old. This car was a snowbird vehicle, so the couple that owned this car prior to me lived in Florida. And this was the car that they would use when they would come back to Massachusetts, which is where MoneyShift is based out of. So with all of that sitting, the tires are just old. So there's a plug-in one that's slowly leaking, and a couple of the other ones have minor cracks. Not really enough to warrant a change, but it's just something I'm going to do to really try and get ahead of the curve here. Tires, HIDs, and we're all set. So other than that, there's some minor things here and there, but whatever. It's a sub 10K used car, so I'm not expecting perfection here, and I love every second of driving this car. It truly is everything that you heard about in the reviews when this car initially launched, how comfortable it was, how feature-laden it was, how much of a real engineering marvel. Like, every day I get in this car and I notice something new. Today, I installed the Bluetooth for this car so that, I can listen to tunes, because if you guys listen to the MoneyShift YouTube channel, you know that I really care about Apple CarPlay and things like that. So I wanted to bring that into the Phaeton as best I could. And the only way that I could really do that was adding Bluetooth to the car, because if you change that center in-dash system, that's the main computer that controls everything in the Phaeton, right? So you cannot change that. You can't just slap in an Alpine double din that has a CarPlay and call it a day. So we put in Bluetooth, so at the very least, I can listen to my tunes, right? And what I love about this is that not only can I listen to my tunes, but I can fully leverage the optional premium audio system that is in this Phaeton. So not only does it have just an overall great Phaeton audio system, but it has the upgraded Phaeton audio system. So it has the better unit. And with that come a lot of features. Remember how you see in some cars, you see things like surround sound mode or play it so it sounds like it's coming out of a concert hall or a studio or things like that. And it just kind of changes the bass or the equalizer, the treble and things like that. The Phaeton has that, but it actually doesn't. I was listening to Hamilton and I'm playing it in the concert hall, and if I closed my eyes in the back seat, I would feel like I was in a concert hall. It was that good. Or if I'm listening to some party pupils, some funk, some upbeat music, right? Some good vibes. You hit it with the studio, or you hit it with something that's driver focused, right? Where it focuses the sound only on the driver, and it sounds amazing. It's just, the sound system blows my mind, right? So every day I'm learning something new about this Phaeton, and I love it so much. Nate goes, Mitsubishi Delica Space Wagon, or a fleet of first generation Mazda MPV four-wheel drives. Nate, I'm going to say the fleet of Mazda MPVs, and I'll tell you why. The Delica is incredibly cool, don't get me wrong, especially if you get a diesel stick shift unit. But remember the freaking Mazda MPV, man? That thing was awesome. And if you could have a fleet of those, I'm assuming one of those is at least rust-free and one of those works. And you probably have more than one that works. So yeah, I'll take the fleet of MPVs in that case. But anyway, on to the new purchase of this week, because we can't go a week without, myself really either selling something or buying something else or really doing something different. And this week is no different, for lack of a better phrase. There's a new Civic in the stable. Presenting the replacement for Project Jesus Fish, Project Jesus Shark. I don't know. Should we call this that? That's kind of lame. I feel like that's kind of lame. That's not kind of lame, actually. That's really lame. But this is the replacement to the Project Jesus Fish hatch. So if you guys remember, I purchased a 1996 Civic DX, and what that car was meant to do, or what it was going to be and what it was going to evolve into, was a K-swapped hatchback that I was going to take to the track, something that could remove the reliance from the Civic Type R, where I didn't have to pay those high consumables, but at the same time give me the basis for a track machine that could eventually scale to the level that I would want to be, right? If you look at the 96 Civic overall, whether it's a coupe, whether it's a hatch, whatever it is, they really do have the ability to be either a bare bones spec Miata type machine where you cage it, you leave either the D16 or any B series that comes with it, and you just send it to Kingdom Come and beat on the car and get better and better, or you can slowly upgrade it. You can give this thing more power, you can give it more aero, and it has both the base in terms of there's enough people modifying this car where you can really get crazy with it, and that knowledge is there, right? So you can get as mild to wild as you want. I was a little turned off by the fact that I still had a long way to go before the K-swap in the hatch was done, and this deal came about. So this is, in fact, a K24 swapped Civic Coupe. So for those of you that are listening to this on the podcast, what's showing right now on the screen is my new red 1997 Civic Coupe, and this is the replacement for my 1996 Civic hatch. And the reason why I did this replacement was because this car was largely already completed in terms of the engine swap. This thing has a K24, and it actually uses all of the parts that I either had and was ready to put in to a K-swap build or still needed to buy, but were the parts I was going to buy. It leverages a lot of Honda it has Honda K-Pro V4. It has the Hasport mounts. Fred says, is it a yes trim? I'm unsure what that means, Fred. Could you give me more on what you mean by yes trim? It is a yes trim in the sense that, yes, I do in fact love it, but I don't know what you're implying when you say yes trim here. But it has a K24, it has an RSX transmission with a limited slip differential, quite literally the exact same transmission that I have in my garage ready to throw in. So when this one blows up, I got another one ready to go. It has an RBC and everything like that. So this is a low to mid. Oh, SI, yes. Yes. No, this is a EX. So this is a step above the Deluxe. So that means it has power windows, power locks, and other things like that. But this is not an SI. So I don't feel as bad that this was a swapped example because EM1 SIs are really going for good value and drastically changing a car like an EM1 SI and doing things like this where it has a K-swap and eventually will have other modifications. It didn't really feel right to me. So I don't feel as bad modifying this car because it is just an EX Civic and they made literally a bajillion of them. But this car was actually set up for drag racing. So the previous owner of this car brought it to New England Dragway, which is the drag strip in the Northeast, and would take the car there. So I got to really do some things to change this car from drag spec, which is where it's effectively at, to HPD or time trial spec, which is what I want to do. So what does that mean? So it means it needs a new wheel tire package because right now it has 15x9s all around that rub at literally any touch of the wheel. Left, right, even a little off center, doesn't matter. It rubs. It looks okay, but it rubs. So those need to go. 2, it needs a brake upgrade, both in the front and the rear. This has drum brakes in the rear, so those need to go. And then in the front, this is making a lot more horsepower than a stock Civic, so the stock brakes need to go. Luckily, Boxster Brembos are available. I have those because I was going to put them on the hatch, so the front upgrade is already set in stone. So we need a brake upgrade front and rear, and then I need coilover upgrade and a wheel tire upgrade. Fred says, really interesting choice for a track car. I do agree. It isn't a cookie cutter, at least on the East Coast. On the West Coast, there are a lot of people that track the Civic. There are a lot of people that track K-swap Civics. They're cheap, man. Like everything you want to do to this car, consumables, I'm replacing 15-inch tires, so the price there is very similar to Miatas. Brakes, other than the Boxster Brembos that I'm going to be putting in the front. Fred, I might hit you up for that extra set of calipers. We'll talk after this offline. But other than the pad pricing for those Brembos, everything else is cheap. The rotors are mini rotors in the front and Integra stuff in the rear. Cheap stuff. Tires cheap. So yes, it is a higher power front wheel drive car in the sense that this isn't something that is like an RX-8 or an RX-7 or a Miata or an FRS or something like that, where it's a lightweight rear wheel drive car. But I'm going to have a lot of fun in this. I'm really, really excited to walk you guys through this journey. And we might even get one track day in this car before the season is up. The people that I've been going to the track with at Thompson have been doing a lot of events, and they have one coming up at the end of November. So while they are, that's obviously up for debate because there's a chance it could either be 60 degrees in the Northeast or it could be 10 degrees with 10 inches of snow on the ground. I'm really, really, really thinking about taking this thing to that event and sort of setting a baseline for where it's at right now. I definitely would need new wheels and tires before that point because it won't even make it around one lap of Thompson before cutting a tire. But that said, if that can be done before then we'll see what we can do in terms of modifying this. I got you if that's going down. Fred, right on. I will hit you up after this. I'm super excited to potentially have you involved in this project. This is a car that I'm beyond pumped about. It sounds the part, looks the part for me. I'm a really big fan. And then exactly, the right seat make you fast. Yes, this hasn't, on a literal level of seats, this has Integra GSR seats, which need to go in favor of a bucket seat to really just like plant me in there. I already have the steering wheel. It already has the hybrid shifter, which is a really solid shifter for these cars. So it's built 90% right. It just needs that 10% to really take it home. And I'm excited to be the man for the job to give it that 10% to take it home. But enough about me. Let's get into this week's news. So we'll start off with, instruct you. Fred, that would be fantastic. I'm really getting into the zone with track days. I've done 7 this year. I did 4 last year. I'm trying to keep that up and keep that going. I really want to improve as a driver, so I would appreciate any and every instruction, my friend. I will definitely take you up on that. Thank you for chiming in there. But on to this week's news. We're going to start with SSC. Okay. If you guys are in tune to the interwebs, if you will, you'll know that there's a lot of controversy right now centered around this man. Who is this man that I am showing on the screen for those of you watching the podcast? This is the CEO of SSC, which stands for Shelby Supercars, but you can't really say that because of Carroll Shelby, so they just say SSC. Anyway, he came out with a video recently talking about the claims that the 331 mile per hour run that the SSC Tuatara did was fake. Commence drama is correct. Multiple YouTubers came out with videos trying to disprove that, saying, hey, look, there's a helicopter that has a top speed of 170, but it's in parallel with the SSC when the SSC says it's going over 200, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so what does he say? He says he revealed that they're going to make another attempt to set a production car top speed record, and this time there will be more thorough with their testing and logging of crucial data, which means they're going to have more than one person verifying the times. They're going to have more than just their own crew out there. He also invited the trio of YouTubers that really slandered the SSC video, including Shmi among them. He invited them in person. He was like, guys, come out, come see the car for yourself, and make your own bones whether you think that this car can go the 331 miles per hour or not. So he didn't state when the new record attempt would happen, but he did suggest it would be done as soon as possible. So I do love this move for a couple reasons. One, Shelby is a really small company. SSC is a really small company, so they may not have had the wherewithal to understand what it really took to create a valid attempt. Granted, they've set one of these before with the SSC Ultimate Aero. They've held the record at one point, so maybe they should have known better. But at the end of the day, they're willing to redo this. They're willing to have the right people. And I agree with you, Nico. Nico says this car will take the record 100%. I totally agree. I think this car has the chops. If you look on YouTube, there's another video of them taking that specific SSC Tuatara, and there's a man that shows up in a Bugatti Veyron, and they're doing sort of highway pulls, and the Tuatara leaves it for dead. And that's a Bugatti Veyron, not a Chiron, I know, but still, the Veyron is an immense machine, right? It is incredibly fast, and the Tuatara leaves it for dead. If you guys haven't seen that video, I urge you to check it out. It is quite the watch. The speed discrepancy between the two is truly immense. It is kind of wild. Excuse me. Fred says, if only a math equation existed or a satellite that could, globally position a thing. Oh, the huge manatee. Yeah, you're totally right. There was definitely things out there that could have made this true from the start. And it is frustrating that it has to come to this point to where SSC has to make this run again, and they have to do it with the YouTubers there and with more than one crew and everything, just because no one's taking them seriously. But at the end of the day, if you're claiming that you went 331 miles an hour in one direction, you gotta back that up, right? This isn't like you beat the Chiron by 1 mile per hour or something like that. You blew that car away. You blew it away. It was really funny to see people like extreme tuners coming out and saying it was bullshit with this equation. With physics, it only could have gone this with this or whatever. Or you saw Hennessy come out and say that there's no way they thought that this thing only did 223 miles per hour, not 331. So we'll see. Nico says, but now this new run has major publicity and they'll probably take it up a notch. Yeah, there's no doubt that SSC is going to the makers of that engine and saying, give us more power. I don't know how you got to do it, but you got to give us literally everything this car can do, because the entire world is going to be watching this event. And if they fuck up, if for whatever reason they don't come close to that 331 number, that's an issue. And Fred, I agree. They shall drink the blood of the non-believer come the time. I am excited to see what they're able to do, but I'm happy that they took this step. I think it's one thing for the CEO of SSC to come out and say, hey guys, screw you. We know what we did. We have the results. No, he's confident in the car and he's confident in their ability to execute and run it again. And that's what they're going to do. So I'm excited to see what comes of that. We'll definitely keep you guys posted with the result, with the timing and everything like that. On to actual machines though. Excuse me. This is the Bugatti Bolide. And oh boy, is it absolutely mental. And I say actual cars, but maybe I shouldn't, because the SSC Tuatara at least has run. It's this car hasn't actually done anything other than take really cool photos and be seen doing demonstration laps. But anyway, so what are the details of this Bugatti Bolide? And for those of you that are watching the live stream, I'm going to run through 3 photos that I have of this car. You can see the back, you can see the front, you can see the inside. For those of you that aren't watching the podcast, again, just as a reminder, we do this on YouTube and on Facebook, so definitely check it out. It's easier to follow along by seeing the pictures of the cars that I'm talking about. So anyway, what is the Bugatti Bolide? So the Bugatti Bolide is Bugatti's attempt to just say, what if we made a track car? What if we used everything we knew and all of the powers that may be to create what could be the fastest track car that we could produce? Fred, you're exactly right. There's a lot of cocaine going on at Bugatti right now. And why do I say that? Why does Fred say that? Well, it's because this is the pinnacle of speed when it comes to Bugatti. So let's quickly get into the details. This car does in fact use the 8-liter that is in the Ceno 10 and the Supersport 300, okay? And what that means is it makes 1,578 horsepower. Let me say that one more time. It makes 1,578 horsepower, but alert the presses, because that is on regular grade gasoline. When you step it up to 110, which is likely what all these rich folks should be running at the track. I don't know, you and me paying $100 per gallon, it feels like, at Thompson or other racetracks for it. But anyway, you pump 110 octane into this thing and you get, anybody? 1,825 horsepower at 7,000 RPM and 1,365 pound-feet of torque at 2,000 RPM. And Fred, I know you say it still has to point a Miata by, but let's talk about some of these numbers, okay? This thing does 0 to 60 in 2.17 seconds. It does 0 to 124 miles an hour in 4.36 seconds. It does 0 to 186 in 7.37 seconds. Again, all of these times are faster than the 0 to 60 of a Miata. And sure, maybe there's going to be one driver out there that has to point this by. But anyway. And then we'll get into some theoreticals. Bugatti says that this thing can do 0 to 311 in 20 seconds. Bugatti's confident this could lap the Nürburgring in 5.5 minutes, which is insane. And they're saying the top speed is even above 311. And they think it could do a Le Mans lap time of 3 minutes and 7.1 seconds. So all those numbers that I just mentioned are simulated. But to say you could run the Nürburgring at 5.5 minutes is fucking bananas. Absolutely bananas. But the craziest part about this, okay, The craziest part about all of this isn't the power, because Bugattis have been making power since the Veyron, right? They've been really, since the EV110, they've been chewing out big numbers, right? Where this gets crazy is the weight. So if you guys paid attention, you'll know that the Bugatti Chiron weighs 4,400 pounds, okay? That's not light. I know there's Challengers out there that weigh 16 million pounds, right? So that's light in comparison. But 4,400 pounds is heavy, which is why it needs that 1,500 horsepower to achieve any of those numbers, okay? And believe me, Fred, I got a lot of respect for the EB110, especially the EB110 SS. Big place in my heart for that car. I'm pissed that the McLaren F1 existed, because it took away so much shine that the EB110 oh so deserved. But anyway, so the Chiron weighs 4,400 pounds, but how much does the Bolide weigh? It weighs 2,734 pounds. 2,700 pounds with an 8-liter that makes 1,800 horsepower. That is why this thing can do 0 to 60 in 2.1 seconds. That is why this thing can do a theoretical Nürburgring time of 5.5 minutes. That is why this thing can get to 311 miles per hour in no time, because it weighs 2,700 pounds. And Fred, I know what you're thinking as I spill water all over my keyboard. I know what you're thinking. How the hell does this Bugatti Bolide weigh 2,700 pounds? And it's a great question. The reason is because it's a lot smaller. This thing doesn't have the footprint of a Chiron. It is a skinnier, it might not be skinnier, but it's definitely like they put it in Microsoft Paint and just downsized it a bit. So this thing doesn't have the same footprint as a Chiron. It is incredibly wide, but overall it is a smaller vehicle than the Chiron or the Chiron 300 or the Cenodici or the whatever other boppity boopity special editions the Bugattis have. So I love this for a couple reasons. One, because it shows Bugatti's ability to say, hey, I know everyone thinks we can only make these crazy top speed cars. Look, we just made a crazy track car that potentially has the ability to set the world on fire. And two, like Nico alluded to in the comments here, there is a lot of talk about the Volkswagen Group selling Bugatti to Rimac, and this being sort of the swan song of Bugatti's ability under the VW Group. And this is quite the note to go out on, if that's the case. This Bolide is seemingly mental. I mean, it is a killer-looking machine. It is all race car. All race car. And the only time we've ever seen Bugatti do that, or the last time we've seen Bugatti do that, is with the EB110 SS, right? So we haven't seen Bugatti make a vehicle like this in a really long time, which is interesting. So I'm trying to find this size for you, Fred, because I remember looking into this, and I was surprised at how big this thing was. Let me see if I can quickly pull this up for you. If I can't, I'm sorry, and I'll add it offline. But it is a smaller machine. If you want to see more EB110 content, by the way, check out Alphalux on Instagram. Alphalux has an amazing collection of vehicles, and he has a Bugatti EB110 that was built by Dower. Because at one point Dower got the patents to continue Bugatti EB110 production. So he has an EB110 SS that was screwed and made together by Dower, and it's carbon fiber bodied. This is probably one of the first cars to do that. So I implore you guys to check it out. If you're fans of Bugatti, if you're fans of cars from that era, Alphalux's vehicle is amazing. But now let's take... Yeah, no, Fred, I'm 100% serious. I don't know if you're on Facebook. I don't know if you are on Instagram or whatnot, but the Bugatti EB110 SS by Dower, you'll see it. I have a rev video on the MoneyShift channel that I can follow up with everybody after this. The car is absolutely mental. But now for some funny news. I'm going to play a quick video and then we'll talk about it. So this is the Robo Race start of the race. Check this out. Crashed it right into a wall. Right into a wall. So what is this? What is Robo Race? If you have your head in the rocks, and I'll play the video one more time for those of you that are watching that might have missed it. Robo Race is exactly what it sounds. It's automated racing. There's no drivers. It's cars that do their own thing. And they tried to race with their new car over the weekend. They tried to race with their new car over the weekend, a simulated race, just watching it go around track, and that is what happened. You get to see the new Acronis autonomous race car immediately veer into a wall. And when I say immediately, I mean immediately. This thing started and just turned immediately to the right. And it was much to the dismay of the Robo Race engineers that were watching this car from the pit lane, but they actually kind of expected this. So they said when our car was given permission to drive, the acceleration command went as normal. That's great. The car knew that it had to speed up. The car knew that it was ready to go. But what wasn't was the steering. They said actually that the steering reflected that it was locked all the way to the right. The engineer wrote that they were looking at the log values and they could see that the controller was trying to steer the car back to the left, but the car didn't execute the steering command due to the steering lock. So what happened is when they set the car to go, the car instantly fully tilted the steering wheel to the right, and regardless of the fact that they were trying to communicate to the car to, hey, steer that wheel back left, didn't matter. It just sent it right into the wall. And they said, quote, the desired trajectory was good, but the car definitely did not plan to go into the wall. Well, I sure as hell hope not, because that's where it went. The engineer suggested that it was an extremely rare event, which there was a short spike in inputs into the controller that caused that to happen. As such, the second round of the race used the default Robo Race car. So, while it would be incredibly interesting to at one point have a world where there's this like AI series where more is in on car design than there is on driver because the driver is effectively the same. If this series can coexist, I don't want this to replace any series. I don't want Formula One to all of a sudden become Robo Race. I would love to just have both because I think that could be a really cool dynamic where one is entirely about the car because the driver is inherently the same. And then there's other series like Formula One where it's a mix of both, right? You have drivers, you have cars, etc. But to see that thing just launch right into the wall reminds me that, folks, we got a long way to go before this Robo Race thing or whatever takes your job as a driver. We're going to watch this one more time. Right into the wall. Right into the wall. And oh boy, is that a beautiful, beautiful thing. On to more car news. This presented here is the Fisker Ocean. And why am I showing everybody the Fisker? Well, that's because Fisker is public. Go to the New York Stock Exchange right now and type in FSR and you'll see the Fisker stock. They are live and they are up. They're actually doing really well. Fisker announced last week that auto supplier Magna would provide the vehicle platform and build the electric car maker's Ocean SUV. As part of the deal, Magna will receive warrants so they can have the ability to purchase up to 6% into Fisker. If this goes well, they have the opportunity to do that, which is great. This gave the company an added $1 billion. Quote from Fisker here, they say, as a result of the completion of the transaction, Fisker expects to have an excess of $1 billion net of transaction fees and expenses of cash on the balance sheet and no funded debt, which is really great. So they IPO'd to get funding to drive home the production of cars like this Fisker Ocean, okay? Fisker is merging with Spartan Energy Acquisition Corp, and they finalized that deal with Canada's Magna to build the Ocean. So everything is in motion, and seemingly Fisker is doing the right thing this time around by taking their time, filling out their channels, and producing an electric vehicle that people actually want to buy. The Fisker Ocean is one that looks to actually meet expectation and actually fit into the electric car world for once. I think if you remember the Fisker Karma, that car was just a letdown from the beginning. It doesn't matter whether it had the Cobalt engine and the electric motor, or whether it had the BMW engine and the electric motor. The car was just overall a failure. But this Ocean right here is going to cost $37,000 and have 300 miles of range. So if not for anything else, its stats are there, so hopefully they can deliver. But if you're following them on the stock market, their stock has gone up about $2 since IPO, which is solid for a company. A lot of these companies go the opposite direction on start, but not Fisker. So Fisker's gone public. FSR, if you guys are into automotive stocks, if you're into stocks in general, check them out. Could be an interesting buy. I'm no professional in the field, just giving you guys the facts to make your own decisions. But let's get on to something a lot more funky. Mitsuoka. For those of you that don't know, Mitsuoka is a company that mainly rebodies other machines. They've made a couple cars themselves, like the Mitsuoka Orochi, if you guys know the funky looking supercar. But the brand is inherently known for making some ugly machines. They're an acquired taste, to say the least. But recently, Mitsuoka has come out with a line of vehicles that look incredibly American, if that's the right word. I mean, this Buddy right here, it's called the Mitsuoka Buddy, which, by the way, is a fantastic name for a vehicle that I cannot believe has not been used up until this point. But the Buddy is an Americanized RAV4. So what you're looking at on the screen is a Toyota RAV4 that has a new front end, which is fenders, which is hood, which is bumper, which is grille, which is lights. And that front end reflects a third generation Chevy CK pickup. So I want to repeat that one time because I think it's hilarious, right? Quote, Chevrolet's trademark bow tie emblem does not appear anywhere on the Buddy, but the grille, the two-piece rectangular headlights are strongly reminiscent of the third generation CK pickup, especially the facelifted model introduced in 81. Mitsuoka redesigned the hood, and it made the front end overall boxier. So they changed the entire look of this RAV4 to reflect an OG American machine. And the back looks very much like a Cadillac. So they added vertical lights. It looks like something like an SRX. Buyers will even be able to order the Buddy with dog dish hubcaps and vintage looking wheels. Mitsuoka is hilarious. So they just didn't stop at slapping something on. They really went all the way. So if you look at this picture right here, these are the vintage looking wheels that I was talking about. But this is just such a cool looking machine. And underneath the hood, it's a RAV4. There's nothing special in here. Don't think you're going to find like some old school 350 or an old diesel like you would find in one of those CK pickups. No, this is a RAV4 with a really cool body kit. That's pretty much it. And to give you guys some insight into other vehicles Mitsuoka makes and why I was saying they're making a lot of Americanized things, this is the Mitsuoka Rockstar, which for those of you listening to the podcast is a ND Miata that looks like an old Corvette Stingray. And I know this is why I'm telling you guys to tune into the podcast, because saying that sentence is hilarious in and of itself, and it needs the picture. But for you guys that are so awesome in joining me and listening to this podcast and watching the live stream and taking part in this discussion, you're able to see what I mean. This truly is an ND Miata that looks like a Corvette. And it's called the Mitsuoka Rockstar. So you got the Mitsuoka Rockstar and you got the Mitsuoka Buddy. And the Buddy was received so well that Mitsuoka's website actually crashed on debut of the Buddy. That's how popular the car was amongst the minds of many. That's how well received it was. I mean, it was everywhere. It was on Jalopnik, Autoblog. It was on all the big Motor Trend, Car and Driver. Everywhere talked about it. And I'm sure none of these guys had even thought to mention Mitsuoka's name before something as cool as the Buddy came out. The last machine we want to talk about today is something that would have unveiled at SEMA this year. So obviously, because COVID-19 is and continues to still be a thing, SEMA is canceled. SEMA is all virtual. Toyota usually comes to play with concepts, with designs, with really cool images, or just cars. And they're making no exception, even though SEMA is going virtual for the 2020 year. One of the cars that they teased is this Supra called the Supra Sport Roof. And the Sport Roof is actually a name that goes back to the 80s for the Supra in terms of what it means. But effectively, it's a target top, okay? So the name recalls the removable top option on some 4th-gen Supras. Unlike more typical T-tops, the entire section would be removed. So back in the day, this was very much like Corvette T-tops, right, that you would find on like a C4 or C5 or stuff like that. It wasn't like something you would get in a Camaro where there was still the beam in the middle. No, the whole thing comes off, and that's no different for this A90. And while it's a sketch, it's a car that's Toyota is going to produce. Now, they've already made some really cool super concepts, including the Heritage Edition, which if you guys haven't seen that thing was really, really cool. It featured things like the quad taillights that evoked the A80 before it and other things. But Porsche continues to make these really, really cool concepts of the Supra, which to me says a couple things. One, we know this thing is already selling pretty well. If you're looking at Toyota Supra sales and comparing it to things like the Cayman and the Boxster, the Supra actually outsells both of those combined. The Supra was on track this year to outsell the Cayman and Boxster. Last year, it outsold the Cayman and Boxster when it released its first full month. So the Supra is selling fine, contrary to you seeing it on dealer lots. In comparison to its competition, which they certainly had to have benchmarked the car off of in terms of what sales figures would be, the Supra is selling pretty well. But two, the continuation of producing cool concepts like these leads me to believe that potentially Toyota is going to be developing some different models of the Supra in the future that aren't just the regular A90 that we see today. I mean, we know that they're thinking about producing new cars coming up in terms of like a GR variant where it's like sort of like an M for the Supra, right? But seeing concepts like these really does affirm that to me. So that's interesting. I mean, we'll see what happens and what comes of it, and especially when the car comes out. But for now, all we have to look at is this computer sketch. So take with it what you will, and hopefully the model that comes out looks exactly like this car. So we actually did have some breaking news, if you will, during the time of this podcast, and I'm going to scramble right now to add pictures of this so that those of you that are watching can really enjoy this. But Volkswagen has finally unveiled its Golf R. The new Golf R is here, and this is what its interior looks like. Contrary to popular belief, let me close out the Supra here. There we go. And there it is. So this is the Golf R interior, and I'll get to the details as I'm working through the photos here for you guys. I'm going to upload them as we talk news. So the Golf R is here, and it promises to actually be the most powerful Volkswagen Golf that has ever been produced. And there's no surprise. I mean, it's really easy for them to increase the power numbers on this car as they get going, especially because we know there's so much left in that Golf to begin with, right? There's so much that's unlocked in just a tune with these cars. Never mind actually from the factory. So there it is. What do you guys think? Those of you in the chat, let me know what you think, and I'll rattle off the details here. So this is the 2022 VW Golf R. It has the 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It makes 315 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque, which is an increase of 27 horsepower and 30 pound-feet of torque. Hilariously enough, there is going to be a manual gearbox, and it's only offered in North America, not in Europe. I love that. The joy of the driving enthusiast is in US and Canada, says Volkswagen. So the engine is going to be paired standard to a 6-speed gearbox, and should you want, you can elect to get the new 7-speed dual clutch DSG. So it's kind of interesting that for whatever reason, Volkswagen deemed there isn't a market that was big enough for the Golf R to have a manual in Europe, and they're only making the automatic. I don't know. That's interesting. Anyway, regardless of which transmission, all models come with the performance-oriented all-wheel drive, which includes torque vectoring, which is great. Hopefully, Volkswagen says this will eliminate understeer and reduce the car's cornering radius, which, by the way, is a big problem with these cars. If you drive the Golf R in comparison or back-to-back to something like an STI, a Focus RS, or a Civic Type R, you'll notice the understeer. It's incredibly apparent. So the introduction of a more advanced torque vectoring hopefully helps solve this, because the Golf R always has the right credentials for success. Like we talked about earlier with Nina talking about her purchase of the 2020 GTI, these cars are screwed together the best by far in comparison to the Focus RS, in comparison to the STI, the Type R, things like that. But what they lacked was some juice, some power, some feel, some excitement. So hopefully this car has that. They say thanks to this setup, it'll do 0 to 60 in 4.7 seconds, which is very quick. Volkswagen has said they have stiffened the Golf R suspension. Engineers also added lightweight aluminum subframes and increased the negative camber to the front axle to allow for higher cornering speeds. Did you notice that? There's a drift mode. There's a special and a drift mode. Special mode is optimized for the Nordschleife, so it features a softer dampening setting than race mode to maintain maximum contact with the road, which I actually think that is really interesting. That's one of the things that the race mode always kind of fucks with on the street, is because race mode inherently always sets the dampers to the stiffest setting. The car ends up bouncing all over the place, which one isn't the best if you want to drive as fast as possible, but two, also is just like super uncomfortable. So to have this special mode, which is everything in race effectively except the suspension, helps the car deal with undulating surfaces like you would find on the Nordschleife. Love that. I think that's really cool. And then drift mode, no surprise. It changes the parameters of the electronic stability control and optimizes power distribution to the rear of the all-wheel drive system. So this car also has the DCC and everything like that, and it's going to be launched in the later part of 2021. It has the 4-tailpipe exhaust. You can get Napa leather on the inside. It's probably going to be a good place to be, as most of the Rs are. As most of the Rs are. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. As most of the Rs are. Yes, exactly. So anyway, thank you guys for joining. Thank you for putting up with me scrambling to get this Golf R information up for you guys. But yeah, this car is going to be available in the latter part of 2021, and pricing is going to be announced closer to launch. It does have the ball shaver shifter that is synonymous now with some Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche products. I'm going to zoom into this so you guys can see this. But yeah, there it is. The ball shaver shifter that was first debuted on the 992 911 is now making its way into the Golf R. So another reason really to opt for the manual. Save the ball shavers for hair, not for your car. On that note, thank you everybody for joining in on the live stream, whether you are on YouTube, whether you are on Facebook. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you for being a part of the conversation. We talked a lot of news today. We talked about some personal stuff as well, and I really appreciate all the comments from you guys along the way. So this is every week, every Tuesday. We will be on Facebook. We will be on YouTube, and potentially there's going to be daily videos in the future or every other day where it's just 1-minute snapshots of news. I'm still working my head around that concept, But what is true is that every Tuesday, we will be live on Facebook, on YouTube, chatting with you guys and telling you about this week in car news. So thank you very much for joining. Again, you can find us on Facebook at MoneyShift Podcast. You can find us on YouTube at MoneyShift, and you can find us anywhere where you stream your podcasts. I am Thanasi. Thank you everyone for joining. I appreciate all of you. Drive safe and be safe.